played Major League Baseball for the Detroit Tigers. And included in this book is stories of the ups and downs of Neil's career and of the Detroit Tigers during those years. Neil Berra's Major League Baseball career hitting stats, as you can see here, the 244 average, didn't hit a home run in the major leagues, knocked in 74, scored 148. Well, for a 7-year Major League Baseball career, we all know that those aren't stellar numbers. But Neil's speed, his defense, and his versatility is what kept him in the major leagues. With the Tigers from 48 to 52, with the St. Louis Browns and Chicago White Sox in 53, and briefly with the Baltimore Orioles in 1954. So the Shortstop from Kalamazoo, the book recalls many historical baseball events of the time, but it's more than just a history book. It's a book about a Kalamazoo kid who enjoyed life's experiences to the fullest and played baseball. You can see here in the picture, Neil playing for Kalamazoo Central at Upjohn Park, and you see his Central jersey there, but this picture would be from his junior or senior year, because as incredible as it sounds, Kalamazoo Central didn't even field a baseball team when Neil started high school as a sophomore, and they hadn't fielded a team for the previous 12 years before that. So Neil was born on January 11th, 1922, and he grew up both in and with Kalamazoo in the 1920s, because the 1920s was a very prosperous era for both the nation and for Kalamazoo following World War I. And the Berra family eventually included 3 boys, 3 girls, and Neil's Dutch grandfather. The family home was located on Waller Street, across the street from Upjohn Park. And this from Neil Berra. I was born and raised, you might say, on an athletic field. Down there were 2 baseball fields. One of them, when I was a little kid, was right in my backyard, and the best teams in Kalamazoo played there. So I was a spectator. As I grew up, the thing that awed me was sports. Sports, and right across was a football field. Kalamazoo Central practiced from here to the road for me for all of my life when I was a little kid. St. Augustine's practiced just across the creek right there too. So the whole thing was sports. Well, during the 1920s, the city built those football and baseball fields in Upjohn Park. And in 1928, Kalamazoo Central High School hired Eugene Thomas as their varsity football coach. You see him in the picture there. Coach Thomas brought the single wing offense to Central football and Upjohn Park, and also the watchful eyes of a young Neil Berra. Now, growing up, Neil and his friends, by his own admission, were a neighborhood of Tom Sawyers. Neil said, we'd sneak out just before it got dark at night, take a saw. Right down the street in Mrs. Yonkers' front yard, I saw a beanie crotch, which is a slingshot handle, and a hockey stick out of her tree. She got mad. I don't blame her. Neil also recalled at Central's practice, the coach would let us kids throw and kick footballs off to the side as long as we didn't get in the way. Well, a football would end up in the bushes. We'd hide it in the bushes. And when the student manager collected the footballs, he never found that one. And without realizing it, Neil was preparing for his sports career. Neil and his neighborhood gang, they were always throwing something at something. As Neil told it, we'd throw at birds, throw at bottles. We'd throw every day. We even threw at the brakeman on top of the train cars when the tomatoes got good in the garden. And I guess a good tomato for throwing it was still green, but it wasn't very promising for a ripe tomato. Now, a sporting event was the only place Neil Berra was likely to run into Gloria Lorenzen, his future wife. And as Neil told that story, well, I really met her, kind of broke the ice by accident. I went for a pop fly foul, and she was standing behind third base, or on the outside of third base. And I was just looking up for the foul ball, and she was looking up, and I was running as fast as I could go, and I hit her going full tilt. I knocked her 6 or 8 feet. Don't remember if I caught the ball or not. Well, he may have not caught the ball, but he did get the girl. And Gloria started shortly after that, clipping newspapers, articles from the sports pages of the Kalamazoo Gazette. And she kept clipping articles for the next 20 years. Well, after demonstrating his sports talent in junior high, Neil was slated to be the starting left halfback on the junior varsity team in 1936. In the single wing offense, the left halfback carried or passed the football, and Neil Berra was very good at both. But while the JV coach was putting together his squad with incoming sophomores, varsity coach Gene Thomas realized he had a problem. Both of his senior left halfbacks were ineligible. So Neil remembers when he got called into Coach Thomas's office. I go in, he said, "Do you think you can play on the varsity?" I said, "Well, sure, yeah." Coach Thomas gave me a stack of those recipe cards, told me to take them home, learn those plays. I said, "Mr. Thomas, I know all the plays. I've been watching Central practice forever. I know them." "Well," he said, "let's see if you know them." And he gave me the deck and he said, "Tell me what they are." So I did. Neil said, "By gosh, they gave me a uniform. The helmet was so big that if I go like this," showing a twisting motion, "I'd be looking out the ear hole." I mean, it was big. Everything was big. My pants hung down over my shoes and my sweatshirt hung down below my hands. Well, Neil didn't start, but he did play in that first game in the 1936 season at Upjohn Park. Coach Thomas saw enough to convince him that Neil could indeed play varsity. And the following Monday, he took him downtown to Miller Borman Sporting Goods, bought him a proper fitting uniform and a brand new pair of shoes. Well, because of Neil's nifty running and his Dutch heritage, the press referred to him, or started to, as the Flying Dutchman. Well, Neil was the second Flying Dutchman in Kalamazoo. The first one was Herman Everhardis. He started for Central a decade earlier, and after he was done at Central, he took his football skills to the University of Michigan and led the Wolverines to 2 national championships in 32 and 33. Well, during Neil's senior year, he did most of the running and the passing and the punting. He even held for extra points when they were kicked. If Neil was in the game and the ball was snapped, he was the first one to touch it every single time. Kalamazoo Central ended Muskegon's 26-game winning streak, and they won the Southwest Michigan Conference and claimed the title of Class A state champions. Neil Berra was named captain of the first team all-state squad by the Detroit Free Press. Well, Neil excelled at football, but his favorite sport was baseball. And organized baseball was provided by the American Legion Post. And that was big business in the day. They had tournaments for districts and for state every single year. And Dr. Homer Stryker started the Legion Maroons in 1930 through the Joseph B. Westnedge American Legion Post. Now, Dr. Stryker coached the Legion Maroons from 1930 to 1936. And Neil Berra played for Coach Stryker's 36 Legion Maroons team, and that team lost in the semifinals of the state tournament. And in this picture, which is cropped from the 1936 team photo, you can see Dr. Homer Stryker there on the left with his son and team mascot Lee Stryker. And then 14-year-old Neil Berra is on the far right there. Well, after the 1936 tournament, Dr. Stryker decided he needed to go back to Ann Arbor to learn orthopedic surgery. So he handed over the Maroons coaching duties to his assistant, Harold McKee. Well, and Neil had this to say about Harold McKee. "If someone asked me who helped me the most with the fundamentals of baseball and hit me a million ground balls, even though I could catch ground balls, what do you do with it after you catch it? Where do you throw it? I'd say that coach would be Harold McKee." In 1937, Kalamazoo's Legion Maroons made it to the state finals, but they couldn't beat Detroit's Roos Banker post ace, Harold Lefty Newhouser. Well, Detroit's Tiger scout Wish Egan was there to see Newhouser, and he intended to sign him as soon as he was done with his American Legion career. But Neil Berry's 7-game total of 11 putouts and 20 assists didn't escape Egan's trained eye. Some other highlights from Neil's American Legion baseball career include pitching a one-hit shutout in the 1938 state tournament, and he won the Kai Kyler Trophy as the tournament's best player in 1939. So after Neil's American Legion baseball career was over, Wish Egan was there with a Detroit contract, but Neil wanted to play baseball at Western State Teachers College, today's obviously Western Michigan University. Well, after the American Legion tournament was over, Neil got his Upjohn Tom Sawyer group back together, and they entered the 1939 Lions Club softball tournament. And the guys didn't have uniforms or anything, and they hadn't played organized ball together, but they were good friends and good athletes. And by the way, they won that tournament. And there might be some recognizable names from the Kalamazoo area in this list of guys. So Neil played football, basketball, and baseball for Western's freshman teams. And the teams were good. They were undefeated in basketball and baseball. And Neil was destined for varsity play, but he decided college wasn't for him. A paper that he had turned in, a final paper for his rhetoric class, wasn't accepted by the professor, and he was asked to go to summer school and rewrite the paper, and he had no intention of doing that because he had other options. So Neil gave Wish Egan a call and signed with the Detroit Tigers. So while World War II was raging in 1942, Neil Berry played his first year of professional baseball for the Winston-Salem Twins in the Piedmont League. Now, these are the teams that made up the Piedmont League in 42, and I have them listed here by their 1941 finish, along with their affiliated clubs. You'll notice Winston-Salem Twins are at the bottom, and they were used to being in the bottom. They had finished last in the league every year since they rejoined the league in 1937. So Neil Berry led off and played shortstop for the Twins, and he quickly established himself as one of the Twins' best players and most popular players. In an early season game at the home park during infield warmup, Neil accidentally overthrew his first baseman, and the ball sailed into the stands in the segregated black-only section, and a fan got a souvenir there. Well, every now and then after that, Neil would accidentally do it on purpose, and the fans loved it. Every infield warm-up at the beginning of the game, they'd holler for Neil to let one loose and throw it into the stands, and he would do that occasionally. And it just happened to be that first baseman that he was overthrowing at that time was John McHale, the future GM of the Detroit Tigers. Well, in June, the Twin City Sentinel reported that Winston-Salem has the youngest professional baseball club in the entire country. Ted Gray at 17 was the youngest, Don Murray at 23 the oldest, and the others ranged there in between. Neil and John McHale, also age 20, were kind of right in the middle of that pack. Well, the youngest team in the country got younger when Detroit signed 17-year-old outfield Vic Wirtz and assigned him to Winston-Salem. Now, Wirtz debuted for the Twins in the second game of the July 4 doubleheader at Southside Park. Vic Wirtz was 0 for 1 in his first professional game, and no one really remembers how Vic Wirtz made that out. But 12 years later, playing on baseball's biggest stage, Vic Wirtz made an out that baseball fans should never forget. In 1954, Vic Wirtz played for the Cleveland Indians team that won the American League pennant. They faced the National League champion New York Giants in the 1954 World Series. In the 8th inning of the first game, Vic Wertz came to bat with the game tied 2-2 and 2 runners on base. At the time, Vic Wertz was already 4 for 4 in that game. Well, he crushed the ball to deep center field. I think a lot of you probably know what happened next. Giant center fielder Willie Mays made an over-the-shoulder catch 450 feet from home plate. He whirled threw the ball back into the infield, holding all the runners. And that catch, which is simply known as the catch, robbed Vic Wertz of the first 5-hit game in World Series history. And it's a play I think we see every single year when the World Series rolls around, and that's a good thing. Well, Neil's first professional season wasn't without some controversy. On August 9th, Neil got the only hit for the Twins, a 2-out, 9th inning bunt. Now, we that don't play the game and some that do know that there's a kind of an unwritten rule in the baseball code that you don't break up a no-hitter late in the game with a bunt. You swing away and get a hit, or the pitcher gets his no-hitter. Okay. When I asked Neil about that, he defended his actions. He said, Bill, all the rules are written down, and we were trying to win a ball game. Well, that being the case, Neil also told me that he did get his manager's approval to bunt in that situation. And the sports press from the Piedmont League towns, they all had a field day arguing back and forth whether it was legitimate for somebody to bunt with 2 out in a no-hitter. So the 1942 Winston-Salem Twins finished the season in last place. The Twin City Sentinel, they declared Detroit didn't give us a winner, but they did give us Barry. And the Twins fan honored their favorite player with Neil Barry Night at Southside Park. Neil Barry also was selected as a Piedmont League All-Star, and that's the first Twin that was selected as an All-Star since they rejoined the Piedmont League in 1937. Now, several members of the 42 Twins eventually did play in the major leagues. John McHale played for the Tigers in 43, 44, and 45. And after putting up some good numbers in Buffalo in 46 and marrying the owner's niece, he was back in the big leagues in 1947. After one at bat in 1948, McHale left the field for the front office. And as we know, he eventually became the general manager. Ted Gray became part of the Detroit starting rotation from 1949 to 1953. Vic Wertz made the Tiger Club in 47. He was traded to the Browns in 1952 and then to Cleveland in 54. Pitcher Bobby Hogue broke into the majors in 1948 with the Boston Braves. And George Vico debuted with the Tigers on opening day 1948. And Vico did what few Tigers have done before or since when he hit a home run in his first major league at bat. And you can see some of the other players that did it and how spread out they were. And it didn't happen all that often. Most recently, Daniel Norris did it in 2015, and Sergio Alcantara, he did it just last year. And of course, Akil Baddoo did it this year, in fact, just last week. And I'm happy to report that I was at the ballpark to see that happen. So the 42 Piedmont League season was over and World War I raged on. And of the 23 players on that Winston-Salem roster in 42, 17 joined the military or were drafted the following season. Neil Barry enlisted in the Army Air Forces in October of 1942. He wanted to fly an airplane, but color blindness kept Neil grounded. Private Barry was stationed at a new bombardier training base in Midland, Texas. Unfortunately, that base did not field a baseball team. Neil was a physical training instructor at the Midland base for much of his service time. And Neil and Gloria got married while Neil was stationed at Midland. It was a comfortable assignment while it lasted. Neil was selected for B-29 gunnery school and was trained to be a central fire control gunner on a B-29 Super Fortress. Well, just before Neil and his crew were scheduled to fly to Australia and join the war, all flights were canceled. The second atomic bomb was dropped on Japan the same day they were scheduled to leave. So on February 4th, 1946, Sergeant Berry was honorably discharged from military service. And after being home from the service for less than 2 weeks, Neil received a Western Union telegram from the Detroit Tigers. Basically told him, please proceed immediately to Lakeland. A few days later, Neil was at spring training in Lakeland, Florida. And Neil said, a couple of games in Florida was all I'd played in 4 years. And there was Joe DiMaggio and Yogi Berra. And I thought, holy cow, what are you doing here? The uniform I had on was big enough for a giant because I had to get number 56, I think it was. It was Steve O'Neill's, the manager's extra uniform. And he was about 5'10" and weighed 250 pounds. And I was 175 at the time. So you know what I looked like, terrible. But I only played 3 innings. Now, Neil also explained, I knew what the scoop was. I knew I wasn't going to stay with the parent club with Detroit in 1946. Well, they sent me to AAA, which is the best there is. AAA is just one little step below the big leagues. They sent me to Buffalo. Well, Neil played shortstop and batted leadoff for the Buffalo Bisons in 1946. Well, 1946 is also the year that Jackie Robinson actually broke the color barrier in the International League while playing for the Montreal Royals. And Neil said, I played against Jackie in 46 when Jackie was playing for Montreal. He was a god up there. And he was a very popular player in Montreal during that year. And the 46 Royals, they won the International League title by 18 and a half games. And Jackie Robinson led the International League in hitting in 46. And his .349 average was a new Montreal team record. So the 46 Buffalo Bisons, they finished 5th in the league, but only 3 games out of 2nd place. And Neil Berry's stats, not bad. He hit for 286, scored 93 runs, knocked 36 in, stole some bases. So these numbers were good enough to get him invited to spring training in 1947. And Neil looked good in spring training, but they had Eddie Lake pegged to play shortstop, and the Tigers sent Neil back to Buffalo. They wanted Neil to play, not to sit. In 1947, Paul Richards took over as manager of the Buffalo Bisons. And Neil has called Paul Richards his best and favorite manager that he's ever had in any level of baseball. And Neil said, Paul Richards is the only guy that ever told me to hit the ball to the opposite field. He helped me a lot, both on the field and mentally too, I mean. When Gloria had the baby, he fixed me up. He told me, you go home. He put me at ease. Well, Neil missed 6 games to be with Gloria after the birth of their first child on June 18th, 1947. And when Neil returned to play out the remainder of the season, he hit over 300 for the rest of that season and almost brought his entire batting average up to 300 based on that. But he'd been playing major league defense for 2 years at Buffalo. So would his 1947 improved hitting propel him to the majors in 1948? Yes, it would. So in those days, when Neil Berry played the game, there were only 400 major leagues roster spots available, and there were over 20 minor league players available to fill each of those spots. Major league ball players were granted 1-year contracts that were largely based on their performance the previous year. The only recourse for a player who was not happy with his final contract offer was to hold out. Well, after leading the league in errors and batting only .211 in 1947, Detroit shortstop Eddie Lake was a no-show holdout in spring of 1948. In the battle for the shortstop position, the Detroit sports press considered, Neil Berry the better fielder, Johnny Lippon, the better hitter, and they thought Lake was the odd man out. Well, the shortstop battle wasn't decided until manager Steve O'Neill announced his lineup a week before opening day. Neil Berry would start the opener against the Chicago White Sox at Comiskey Park. Johnny Lippon and Andy Lake also made the team, so Neil wasn't done looking over his shoulder. Neil got his first major league hit in RBI in the opener, a 5-2 win for Detroit. And after 9 games, Neil was batting .270 in the leadoff spot. Then he pulled a muscle in his leg. And according to Neil, you get hit with something, and the first thing they think is, I wonder what that guy in Toledo could do for us, or Buffalo, or Beaumont. Yeah, they're making a telephone call when I got hurt, and I hadn't even got to the dugout yet. They're already calling for the guy to come on up. There was always somebody ready to take your place. You didn't mess around. Well, Detroit already had Johnny Lippon on the bench, and he started the next 7 games. Manager Steve O'Neill, he played both Lippon and Berry for a while, but ultimately Johnny Lippon prevailed. And in the meantime, Eddie Lake actually played himself into a full-time job at second base. And Neil said, I told lots of people when I got down, me or anybody else on the team, when you were hitting and you got down to .250, they were looking for somebody else. So both players that Neil beat out in spring training, Johnny Lippon and Eddie Lake, were playing full time, and Neil Berry and his .248 batting average was riding the bench. Well, in late August, both Eddie Lake and third baseman George Kell went down with season-ending injuries. Neil Berry got back in the lineup at second base. And in his first 10 games, he hit .366. He played the final games of the season at second base, including the 1948 season finale, which Neil says was his favorite Major League Baseball game. On the last day of the 48 regular season, 2 games would determine the 48 American League champion or result in a 1-game playoff for the title. The New York Yankees at the Boston Red Sox, and the Detroit Tigers at the Cleveland Indians. All Cleveland had to do was win. But if Cleveland lost and Boston won, they would meet in the first playoff game in American League history. When asked who was the toughest pitcher he faced in the majors, Neil replied, the Cleveland staff. In 1948, that Cleveland staff included Gene Bearden, Bob Lemon, Steve Gromek, Satchel Paige, and their ace, Bob Feller. Neil's batting average against Cleveland in 48 was 44 points lower than his season average. So with Cleveland going for the pennant, it was Detroit's Hal Newhouser against Cleveland's Bob Feller. Newhouser was going on short rest and going for his 21st victory of the season. Feller, he was going for his 20th win and, of course, going for the American League pennant. Feller was pretty confident, as was the Cleveland Indians. Feller had beat Newhouser in their previous 3 head-to-head meetings. And Neil said there were 74,000 people in the stadium, standing room only. The place was jumping. They had firecrackers and noisemakers. They were celebrating already. But of course, there was a game to play. Johnny Lippon and Neil Berry set the table. Vic Wirtz and Dick Wakefield drove them in. They chased Bob Feller after 2 1/3 innings, while Hal Newhouser went 9 innings for a 7-1 win. And Neil had a pretty good day. A sacrifice bunt in the first, a single, a run scored in the third, a double and a run scored in the fourth, and he walked in the 6th inning. And well, I should finish this story then. So yes, Boston did their part by winning their game, and Cleveland had to go to Boston the very next day and play the Red Sox in that first American League playoff game. Cleveland won that game, as we know, and they went on to beat the National League Boston Braves in the World Series. Neil's numbers in 48 put up a .266 average and scored 46 runs, only knocked in 16. He started the year at shortstop, ended the year at second base, but there were no guarantees for next year, 1949. Well, after finishing in fifth place in 1948, the Tigers fired Steve O'Neill and hired former Yankee Red Rolfe to lead the 49 Tigers. And Rolfe, talking about second base, said, it's no secret that we tried to improve our second base situation. Yet I don't believe we're as bad as we seem to be. Berry hit 266, and that was topped by only three other second basemen in the league, Jerry Priddy, Bobby Doerr, and Joe Gordon. He fielded 980, and that was bettered only by George Sternweiss and Bobby Doerr. Well, Neil Berry came to spring camp nursing a sore arm in 1949. He didn't tell the Tigers that a shoulder injury while playing basketball was the reason he had a sore arm. But he recovered and was named the starting second baseman for the 1949 season. But after 10 games, Neil was hitting just .073, and then he caught a bad hop in the face, and Red Rolfe decided to give Neil a few days off. Eddie Lake, he didn't hit much better, and on May 7th, Detroit traded for Chicago White Sox infielder Don Calloway. And Neil Berry was relegated to a utility role and appeared in only 19 of the next 55 games. Then George Kell went down with a broken toe, and Neil got another chance. He started 76 of the remaining 86 games at second base. And at that time, Red Rolfe, he wanted Neil to get on base more often. And so he told Neil to crowd the plate if you got a 2-ball count, and crowd it more if you got a 3-ball count. Well, facing the Yankees' Allie Reynolds, Neil took 2 pitches for balls. And remembering his manager's advice, he moved a little closer to the plate. And Neil told what happened next. So I can remember Yogi catching back there when I got ball 3 on me. No strikes, ball 3. So I got up on the plate. Yogi caught the ball on ball 3 and he threw it back to Reynolds. Reynolds, just standing on the rubber, didn't hardly take a sign. He just reared back and threw at me. Hit me on the elbow. I said, "What the heck's he doing? I can't hurt him or anything." Yogi said, "He just don't like you doing that. Now you're on first base, but you're hurting." So I guess Red's advice on how to get on base worked, but I don't think that's what Red Rolfe had in mind with that advice about crowding the plate. Well, the Tigers did make some noise in the 1949 pennant race. On August 27th, Neil Berry had probably his best hitting performance of his major league career, or at least that season. He had 2 clutch hits, went 4 for 4, scored 2 runs, knocked 2 in, and a 7-6 win over the Senators. It was Hal Newhouser's 14th of the season and Detroit's 6th consecutive win. Now, after winning 18 of 20, Detroit was a very respectable 82-58, 24 games over 500, but there were only 14 left to play. They'd have to win most of those. But after a losing series to New York, Boston, and Cleveland, the Tigers ultimately finished in 4th place. George Kell did win the 1949 American League batting title on the last day of the season, beating out Ted Williams by a whisker. In his second big league season, Neil started 90 games at second base, fielded 970. But at the plate, he only contributed a .237 batting average, scored 38, knocked in only 18. The Detroit press speculated that if Detroit could fill a couple holes, they could make a run at the pennant in 1950. Well, they started filling those holes on December 14, 1949, when they traded for St. Louis Browns second baseman Jerry Priddy. Neil Berry wasn't happy. "I know I'm slated to warm that bench all year. I'd feel better if they traded me to some other club where I could play." So the acquisition of second baseman Jerry Priddy cemented Neil Berry's role as a utility player in 1950. In his 3rd season, Neil started on the bench and played sparingly for the contending Tigers. And the Tigers did contend. They contended all year, but they came up just short and with 95 wins, but that was 3 behind the first place Yankees. Neil appeared in only 39 games and had 10 hits in his 40 at-bats. In 1951, Neil Berry got the opening day start at third base, replacing an injured George Kell. His third different opening day position in his first 4 years in the majors. The difference this time is Neil knew it was temporary because when George Kell was ready, George Kell was going to play. Now, in that 1951 season, Neil Berry was the starting shortstop for both ends of a doubleheader against the St. Louis Browns in Sportsman's Park on August 19th. The second game included a stunt that will forever live in baseball lore. The Browns were a bad team, and their owner, Bill Veeck, needed to come up with gimmicks to keep the fans coming to the ballpark. The between game festivities, including the presentation of a giant birthday cake celebrating the American League's 50th anniversary. And all at once, a midget in a Browns uniform popped out of the cake, and the 3'7" Eddie Goodell bowed to the cheering crowd. The number on his uniform was 1/8, and the crowd loved it. In the second game of the doubleheader, the Browns manager, he called his leadoff hitter back for a pinch hitter and out-trotted Eddie Goodell, all of a yardstick and 7 inches tall. After the Browns manager showed the umpire valid contract, he had no choice but to let Goodell hit. And Neil overheard Tiger catcher Bob Swift advise his pitcher, Bob Kane, to try and keep the ball down. But Goodell walked on 4 pitches and was immediately replaced with a pitch runner. The next day, the American League banned midget players from the game, determining that their continued participation was conduct detrimental to baseball. Well, Bill Veeck demanded a ruling on whether Yankee shortstop Phil Rizzuto at 5'6" was a short ball player or a tall midget. I don't think Veeck ever got that ruling, by the way. Well, Detroit ended their disappointing 51 season with a 73-81 record, 25 games behind the first place New York Yankees. Neil Berry appeared in 67 games, posted a .229 batting average in 51. And in 1952, the starting shortstop job was up for grabs again in the spring training. And Neil Berry hit enough, he displayed superior defense, and he won the shortstop job. And so in 52, Neil Berry started on opening day for the 4th time in 5 years, but after 6 games with only 2 hits, Johnny Lippon started game 7. Well, on June 2nd, the last place Tigers pulled the trigger on a blockbuster trade with the leading Boston Red Sox. The Tigers sent Johnny Lippon, Hoot Evers, George Kell, and Dizzy Trout to the Red Sox. And in return, they got pitcher Bill Wright, outfield Don Renard, shortstop Johnny Pesky, third baseman Fred Hatfield, and first baseman Walt Gopro. And to demonstrate the magnitude of this trade, of the 9 players traded, 8 of them were regulars on their teams at the time. So Johnny Lippon, Neil's competition for that shortstop position was gone to Boston, but Neil was still stuck in the utility role behind the newly acquired veteran shortstop, Johnny Pesky. And a week after that big trade, the Tigers signed their shortstop of the future, Harvey King, 21-year-old out of University of Wisconsin. On Tuesday, August 5th, the last place Tigers limped into St. Louis with a 36-67 records. They were 5.5 games behind the 7th place Browns. So could Detroit overtake the Browns in the last 50 games, or would they finish last in 1952? Well, on August 6th, the Browns started 46-year-old Satchel Paige against Detroit's Virgil Trucks. Now, Paige hadn't pitched a complete game in the majors since '49. Paige and Trucks both pitched a shutout through 9 innings, and then the Tigers loaded the bases with nobody out in the top of the 10th inning. And in his biography, Maybe I'll Pitch Forever, Satchel Paige told the story this way. I was careful. I wanted this game. I'd pitched too many innings in it to give it away. I pitched my fast sinker, and Johnny Pesky pounded it into the ground, and we got a force at home plate. That was 1 out and no run in yet. Johnny Groth came up. I fired hard and low to him, and he grounded into a forced play at home plate too. 2 outs and no runs in. That's the way, my catcher yelled at me. We're almost home. Well, I figured we were home. Neil Berra was up, and I just fired my trouble ball, 3 in a row for 3 called strikes. Paige's line in that complete game shutout, 12 innings pitched, 7 hits, no runs, 2 bases on balls, 9 strikeouts. Detroit won only 14 of the remaining 49 games after losing to Satchel Paige. And the last place Tigers won 50 and lost 104 in 1952. There were some individual highlights in that dismal season. Virgil Trucks pitched 2 no-hitters that year. And Walt Dropo had 12 consecutive hits and 12 plate appearances. And I believe that's still the record. Harvey Keene, he batted .340 with Davenport and was called up on September 6th. And Keene started at shortstop for 19 of Detroit's remaining 20 games. And in those 19 games, Keene only struck out 1 time while putting together a .325 batting average. Harvey Keene was a fixture at shortstop for Detroit for the next 4 years. And after his call-up in 1952, Keene started 365 games in a row at short, with the only exception being the last game of the 1952 season. Neil Berra started at shortstop in the 52 finale at Briggs Stadium against the Cleveland Indians. Neil was 3 for 5 with a run scored and RBI. It was the last game in a Tiger uniform for the shortstop from Kalamazoo. Neil Berra was traded to the St. Louis Browns prior to the 1953 season. His utility role stuck. He hit .143 coming off the bench, but he did hit .306 in games that he started. Satchel Paige was still pitching for the Browns in 1953. And during spring training of 1953, so was a young pitcher trying to make the team. That young pitcher was Tommy Lasorda. Bill Veeck had purchased Lasorda from the Brooklyn Dodgers for $50,000, and he pitched well enough in spring training to make the club. But on the way back from spring training in California, Bill Veeck informed Tommy Lasorda that he had to send him back to Brooklyn because unfortunately he did not have the $50,000 he needed to complete the deal. So it was a little surprising to me when I learned that the careers of Satchel Paige and Tommy Lasorda overlapped in that one spring training of 1953. Now, Neil was claimed by the White Sox on September 1st to help their pennant push. And his favorite manager, Paul Richards, was managing the Sox. Neil recalled Minnie Minosa was there. When I checked in there, I emptied my bag out in front of my locker. Minosa was a couple lockers down from me, and he looked and he started laughing. The guy says, "What are you laughing at?" And he says, "Small feet." Neil said, "Me? You looking at my shoes?" Which were only size 5. And he says, "Nobody steal your shoes. You got small feet." Well, Neil and his small feet appeared in 5 games in September for the White Sox, and they didn't end up winning the pennant that year. In fact, they ended up finishing in 3rd place. And prior to the 54 season, the St. Louis Browns moved to Baltimore and became the Orioles. And Chicago traded Neil to the Baltimore Orioles. And he had only 10 plate appearances for Baltimore before he was traded to the Yankees and assigned to AAA Kansas City. Well, Neil declined to join the Yankees after Kansas City's season was over. He didn't want to what he called carry Phil Rizzuto's water, which meant sub in for him in the late innings. And he would not have been eligible for a World Series share. Of course, the Yankees didn't make the World Series that year. But choosing not to report to the Yankees was the end of Neil Berra's playing career. And that's probably a good place then for us to end this presentation about the shortstop from Kalamazoo. But before I open it up for questions, I do feel that I have to give thanks to my co-author, Mitchell the cat. And you can see Mitchell helping me here on the book. So with that, we'll take any questions anybody might have.
So if you have a question, you could type it either, well, go ahead, you either type it in the chat or type it in the Q&A box, or if you want to raise your hand, you can do so, and I will unclick you, or unclick so you can ask the question in person. We do have a question from Nick. He says, are you working on another project now?
I'm not working on another project at this time. I guess I'm sort of waiting for that next project to find me. And that's kind of how this project came about. I never expected to meet Neil Berry at the very end of his life and hear all his great stories and things. So when the project finds me, I'll be working on it. In the meantime, I'm very heavily involved with my photography.
Bill, how did Neil, I mean, he played with so many great players. I mean, so many great players, and you didn't even mention all of them. How did he talk about them? Was there like a reverence? Did he have a favorite player he played with? I'm really curious about that.
There were some players that, yes, he really liked. He really liked how they played. Some of them were on other teams.
Mm-hmm.
Yogi Berra, for example, he said he was the best bad ball hitter you ever saw. He said he admired Yogi for being able to hit with such a high average and hit as well as he did, because he could swing, and he said he'd swing wild, but he knew how wild to swing, and he was constantly getting hits that way. There was a player that I guess he didn't care for very much, and that comes out a little bit in the book, but George Kell, a teammate. And Neil thought that George Kell was out more for George Kell than he was for the Detroit Tiger team. Paid more attention to his batting average than he did than he cared how the Tigers were actually doing. And that was Neil's opinion. And he didn't care for George Kell.
That was maybe my follow-up question, if there's what he didn't like. So thank you.
Yeah.
That's interesting. He didn't like George Kell. I mean, somebody like me growing up, I knew he was a player and he was a good player, but I just know him as a television announcer for the Tigers mostly.
Oh, absolutely. That's where I first heard him. And they go, oh, he used to play.
Exactly. And then I remember learning that he beat Ted Williams out that year by, the slimmest of margins. But apparently he was a good defender. Yeah, apparently he was a good defender as well, George Kell.
Yeah, Neil said he said he had a major league arm because he could throw it from third base to first base.
Mm-hmm.
Neil didn't think he had a lot of range. He was a high fielding percentage because he didn't have a terrific range, in Neil's opinion.
Yeah, he would get the balls that come to him, but he never made.
Yes, he said he could play all those that came to him.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I don't like fielding percentage sometimes as a stat. Doesn't really tell you much.
Exactly.
Any other questions for Bill? Oh, there's some in Q&A, sorry. Jonathan wants to know, did he say anything about his managing experience at Montgomery in '58?
Yes, I have a whole chapter in the book about that. I felt like I was filling up this presentation with enough information. I didn't have time to go into that, but yeah, he talked about that experience in '58, managing. He took over actually for Schoolboy Rowe, I believe, who got ill. Wow. And had to give up the managing post. And he took over a bad team record-wise. And later in the season, he was able to pick up more players, and they almost made the playoffs after such a bad start. But yeah, story about him. His wife and family came down that year, and he managed that one year. The very next year, I believe the Tigers contracted the number of minor league teams, and so there were fewer opportunities. And of course, Neil, having been coaching only 1 year, was one of the coaches they cut, and did not retain a job, and then didn't go back into coaching again.
Interesting. Did he say he liked it or not like it enough to stay? It sounds like.
No, I think he liked it. I think he would have coached again and
Mhm.
at this team or another one, if there would have been an opportunity for it.
Okay. We have a question from Ryan. He says, "Thanks, Bill. Great job and very interesting. Did you say Neil came back to Kalamazoo after his playing days?"
Yes, yes, he lived in Kalamazoo for his entire life. He actually worked for Kalamazoo County for a long time and did union construction jobs around town. Uh, and he lived here his whole life. His last several years he lived with his daughter
Mhm.
uh, locally here. But yeah, he came back to Kalamazoo,
And I think his
raised here
daughter,
and came back here.
yeah, I think his daughter Linda's here in the presentation as well. So,
Hi, Linda.
hi, Linda. um, hey, Linda, do you have anything to say to put you on the spot? Let me see. I can.
No, I just wanted to thank Bill for all that he did for my dad. He and my dad became great friends, and it was so touching to see that relationship. And I just can't thank him enough.
It was kind of like a Tuesdays with Maury kind of situation. It sounds like
Absolutely.
this book with Mitch Albom wrote about visiting.
Absolutely, it was. I thought of that very often, but yeah, my dad considered Bill one of his best friends, and it was an awesome relationship.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't. Eldon Ocker, the former Tiger pitcher, I remember him being the oldest living Tiger for the longest time, but he must have died before Neil. Is that how Neil?
Yes,
Okay.
and I'm trying to remember what player died within 6 months of myself meeting Neil to make Neil the oldest.
Yeah. Okay.
It's in the book, but I can't remember
Okay.
which
That's okay.
what player that
I
was.
think it was Virgil Trucks.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, being a huge Tiger fan myself, it's just amazing. I mean, I was living here in 2016, so I mean, I would have tagged along and carried Bill's water on those conversations. So,
Well, one of the interesting afternoons was the afternoon I brought my mother along, who also went to Kalamazoo Central High School. Knew Neil's sister real well and was a few years behind Neil, but I sat back. They talked for 2 or 3 hours, and I think Neil really enjoyed that.
If there's not another question, I have one more, and I'll try not to ask too many. What was Neil's feeling on Derek Jeter?
Well, Neil did an interview with which I have part of that in the book concerning Derek Jeter right after he got signed by the Yankees, and it was pretty much wishing Jeter well, hoping he made it. He said something like, I hope he also goes to school in case it doesn't work out for him and things like that. Of course, we know it worked out for him.
Yeah.
So that was right when Derek Jeter got signed. But then as time went along, I think Neil maybe was a little bit, I don't know if frustrated is the right word, but Derek Jeter seemed to get all the accolades, many well-deserved, but more so than I think Neil thought he deserved. There was one spot where the baseball announcers, we were watching a game together where the shortstop made a play and whirled and leaped and threw, and the announcer said, Jeter-like he made the play. And Neil just shook his head and goes, shortstop had been making the play like that forever, before Derek Jeter came along. But so, yeah, I think a little later in his life, he was maybe just a tad jealous of the success. But let's face it, when Neil played and he came home between seasons, he had to go out and get a job.
Yeah.
Baseball didn't pay the bills when he wasn't playing baseball, and we all know how that's changed.
Yeah. Well, and Derek Jeter was a Yankee, and if you're anything related to the Tigers, that's just, you don't like the Yankees. So
absolutely don't like the Yankees. Yep.
So,
but people that read this book, I think they're going to figure out in a hurry that during the period of time I'm writing about, the spoiler for the Tigers quite often was the Cleveland Indians,
Exactly. Yeah.
not the Yankees during that period.
Mhm. So if people want to get your book, Bill, and read the book, yours and Mitchell the Cat's book, where can they pick that book up?
Well, they can buy it at Amazon if they'd like to. They can pick it up at Michigan News Agency,
Mhm.
or they could get it at our website, which is Neil Berry Book. Is that right?
Mhm.
neilberrybook.com. If they go there, they'll be able to purchase it autographed directly from me.
Well, I encourage everyone to go out and get this book. It's super fun to read about. I'm not from Kalamazoo, but I've lived here for the last 23 years. And it's just so fun to read a book that's based in just so many places, and to hear about, I keep saying he's the other famous shortstop, the first famous shortstop from Kalamazoo. And it was fun to read. The presentation was great. I really appreciate you spending the time with us, Bill. And hope to see you write another baseball book soon. And thanks to Deb and Mitchell the Cat for helping you out today.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, and I'm looking forward to the other presentations in this series.
Yeah, so thanks for mentioning that. Yeah, we have more next Thursday. We have Cesar Brioso with talking about his book Havana Hardball. And in the chat, I had also, well, actually, I think I might, in the chat, there is a URL. It's www.kpl.gov/survey/999ADA. And if you click that in the chat, it'll open up another window to fill out a survey about today's program. Please, if you enjoyed what you watched today, if you could please fill that survey out to give us feedback on future programming and whether we want to keep this Baseball Books on Deck program alive every year. That feedback will be important to that. And again, thanks to Saber, the Southern Michigan chapter, and thanks to Bill and Deb and Mitchell. So, all right, everybody have a great night. Go Tigers, and we'll see you next week, hopefully. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye. Good night.
Good night. It's so cool you were at that Akil Badu game, Bill.
I thought that was cool too.
Yeah.
I had to come home and change the presentation.
Yeah, I know. I ruined it for you though in the chat. I'm sorry. I was like, you got to add Akil Badu to that, and then you did it. I'm sorry. I should have known. I should have known you're gonna put that there. It was so funny because I'm not many. There's my youngest daughter and I are probably the biggest baseball fans, and so we like every day I was saying, Akil Badu did this and he did this, and then the other day, what did he do today? That everyone asked. I was like, I'm making you a fan. So, but yeah, it was he's having a great run, and it's amazing. I hope he keeps it up. It would be nice for the Tigers to get lucky like this again, to find like somebody like lightning in a bottle like this. That would just be so great.
Yeah, and it'd be fun to watch them then, even if they're not winning.
Yeah.
But
it was, yeah, exactly. It'll be totally fun to watch. And then he's going to take over the mantle of the sound we used to hear of Lou. It'll be Badu.
Yes, it will. Yeah, yes, it will.
I heard it on the radio, and I thought that was hilarious. So, all right. Thanks again, Bill. I really appreciate it. Hope to see you around town when the pandemic's over.
Okay. Thank you much.
Yeah. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.